Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church in Columbia, South Carolina, where we're part of the ELCA. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I had been in Israel probably about 5 days at one point, and we were headed down toward Jericho when the bus stopped for us to tour the ruins of a city called Bet Shean. I was interested to see whatever they were going to show us, but I had never heard of this city. On the way in, our guide showed us a tree and plucked a pod that was growing there. This is a carob tree, he told us, and these pods full of seeds are called locusts. So what I learned outside of Bet Shean was that John the Baptist wasn't in the wilderness eating bugs, and rather that he was eating chocolate, or more specifically, carob seeds. What I learned inside Bet Shean was also interesting. The city was in Israel, but it was a thoroughly pagan city with Roman culture and ways. I stared in fascination at the large amphitheater they had there for plays and speeches. I marveled at the streets that had been excavated with columns lining them on both sides. I wondered at the area that was their marketplace and how you could still see where the stalls of the shopkeepers and vendors were. It was amazing how the archaeologists had dug through the dirt and exposed the leftovers of this city for us to see today. More importantly, this was an example of what cities in the time of Jesus would have looked like. And it was intriguing to think of Jesus walking through a city like that. When we got back on the bus, our guide told us that Beth Shean was one of the cities of the Decapolis. We're continuing to look this week at Sacred Geography, a series of episodes that highlight places in the Bible and how their very location is an important part of the Bible story and what those stories mean. Today we are talking about the Decapolis. I can't really think of any modern comparison to the place the Decapolis held in the society of that day. Maybe the best comparison might be Vatican City, a distinct country completely within another country. In fact, completely within another city, and completely separate too. But Vatican City is alone. The Decapolis was a group of 10 cities like that. The Decapolis was a group of 10 independent Greek-Roman cities, mostly east of the Jordan River. They were major cities and hubs of commerce, but they were independent of the nations and regions they existed in. They were thoroughly Gentile, culturally pagan, and religiously foreign to Israel. I believe Bet Shean was the only one of these 10 that was actually in Israel proper on the west side of the Jordan River, in an area we might call the West Bank now. While these cities were related to each other, they were independent too. There are two stories from the Gospels that occur in the Decapolis. The first is the one where Jesus and the disciples cross the Sea of Galilee to the region of the Gadarenes. Before we go any further, let me point out that Jesus is now on the east side of the Jordan River, out of Israel, and the understanding of their time was that a God had power only in his or her own land. No one would have expected Jesus to be able to do any miracles here. When they came ashore, they met a man with so many demons that he couldn't be restrained. And in fact, the demons called themselves Legion, since they were so many. Jesus cast them out, and they went into a herd of swine nearby and rushed down the hill into the sea and drowned themselves. When this story was all said and done, there were two things that had happened. First, the townspeople saw the demoniac clothed and in his right mind, and they asked Jesus to go away. They were fearful of God drawn so near to them. Second, the man who had the demons begged to go with Jesus, to follow him. And Jesus turned him away. Go back to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, Jesus told him. Now that's interesting. One way to understand this is that Jesus commissions this guy as the very first missionary to the Gentiles. Jesus sends this Gentile man to tell other Gentiles about Jesus and God's love. Perhaps we see the result of this man's work a few chapters later in the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus and his followers returned to the region of the Decapolis. When he got there, they didn't send Jesus away, but rather immediately brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech. Jesus took him aside and healed him too, speaking the word Ephphatha, which wasn't any kind of magic word, but simply means be opened. The people of the Decapolis were amazed and wondered at Jesus. Still, I wonder if when Jesus said those words, be opened, if they might not also be directed toward the region of the Decapolis. Be opened to God in your midst. Be open to the new thing God is doing in me. Be open to forsaking your independence and join in the movement of God. Be open to leaving your pagan ways behind to follow Jesus. Still more, I wonder if those words, be opened, might not be directed toward us too. Be open to people who are foreign to you, people with customs and ways that are completely different from your own. Be open to the fact that they are God's people too, in need of grace like you, and who have received grace like you. Be open to setting yourself aside and welcoming all people as children of God. The demoniac was naked, violent, and isolated, but Jesus restored him to dignity and community and gave him a mission. These people weren't part of the in crowd, but Jesus went to them. The cities of the Decapolis were isolated and alone. Because of them, we learn the church is sent to the margins of society. The stories of the Decapolis anticipate Pentecost. The gospel is for all people. Thanks for sharing these moments with me, and remember to let this day belong to God.